And we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And I'm very excited today, all the way from New York. I've got Dan Manian. And Dan, you're the co-founder and CEO of Donut. And for those that don't know what that is, you've been living under a rock, but we will get into that. You're also the adjunct lecturer at Brown University doing a lean startup course there every year. So we may or may not get into that, but I think that's a really interesting fact for the audience that's listening. But let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Yeah, so for me, there's a few key pieces to my setup, and my virtual in these sort of strange times during COVID has actually I've been a little bit nomadic in terms of where I go, but wherever I go, it's a large monitor, so that I'm kind of working on a big space. I always have a ergonomic keyboard with me. That's like a split keyboard, just because I'm want to keep my wrists in good shape, and then a external mouse. And those are kind of like the three key pieces. Of course, a table or desk and a reasonably comfortable desk chair. I actually have on the way one of those things that sits on your desk and converts it to a standing desk and back.
Nice.
TBD on how that goes. Pre-COVID, I didn't have one of those, but now that in addition to working from home, we're also all kind of stuck at home.
Right.
I'm looking for more ways to stretch my legs.
The movement on my end has also gone way down since, and we're not like on total lockdown, but for some reason I've stopped moving so much. So yeah,
Yeah.
It's a danger. All right. Well, I want to ask quickly about the monitor. So is it an external monitor or is it like a second monitor? Okay.
It's
so there's
external monitor.
Okay. And you use it, you said basically for real estate. Like you want to have more room than just on the laptop. Okay, because what's happening now is people, since going COVID, they're realizing that they need more real estate. Most people are working off of one screen. I have like 3 external monitors, so it's totally ridiculous over here. But I find that if you really want to collaborate online, it really is helpful to have an external monitor so you can see people on one and collaborate on the other. So I'm wondering if you're nodding your head. So for those that are listening, he's nodding his head. Is it just real estate that you use it for, or is it also you find you need it for collaboration?
Yeah, I think it helps with collaboration. So I'm on my laptop right now, but I'll typically have my laptop and an external monitor, and I'm pretty much doing all of my work on the monitor. But then if I'm on a Zoom, I'll have people on the laptop screen so that I'm able to screen share and look at content with someone. There's no whiteboards for us to use physically and look at the same time. So we're frequently looking at a shared doc or something that we're working on, and as well as looking at each other.
Yeah, I find that the really seeing the people that I'm collaborating with somehow really helps with the collaboration. Even though I can hear them if we're sharing the same space, if not being able to see them really detracts for me. So that's why I've been asking a little bit into people's monitor setup. So for all of you single monitor users out there, it's time to go get an external monitor.
And the other thing on that front I've been more cognizant of lately is trying to make sure I'm looking at the webcam, or at least close to it when I'm talking. Just because I've noticed when people are like looking 45 degrees off talking to you, it's a little like you're kind of missing that eye contact. So.
It's hard to tell whether they're distracted or whether they're paying attention somehow. It like takes away from the presence of being online. True. Very interesting. Yeah. So you are the co-founder and CEO of Donut. And for those of you who don't know what Donut is, Dan, tell us what it is.
Yeah, so at Donut, we're on a mission to help people create more trusting, collaborative, and successful work relationships. So we're all about connecting people, helping them get to know each other better and work better together. We think this is a challenge, frankly, every company faces on some level, but the degree of difficulty just goes way up once you're fully remote. The primary way we help companies do that is through an integration with Slack, where you can run all sorts of different kinds of connection programs where Donut will introduce you to somebody else at your company. So we actually make introductions on Slack through a multi-party direct message. The context could be grab a virtual coffee. It could be for a mentorship program. It could be for a new hire buddy system. So there's a lot of different contexts in which we connect people, but it's all about making that connection and then having them, in the case of remote work, get on a Zoom or a video call together. Back when some people were still working in person, folks actually would physically get together and have lunch or do a coffee as well.
Interesting. I actually thought it was all remote, but indeed, why wouldn't it be able to be used in person as well? You get randomly paired up with somebody. So what was the impetus of creating this? Why did you do it?
Yeah, so prior to Donut, I've been doing startups for a decade plus, and firsthand had sort of experienced the hypergrowth phase where you go from this really small team, everybody really knows each other, has a deep relationship, to all of a sudden you're over 100 people and you kind of recognize the faces, but maybe not, and you definitely don't know what everybody's doing anymore, or like why there's all of a sudden a biz dev department in your company and what they're doing. And really saw that there's this loss of this kind of culture and this trust from the early days, and thought there should be something we can do about this. And there's really no tools out there that helps maintain that level of connection. And we really set out on a mission to can we build something that maintains that connectedness, that feeling of culture and trust from the early days when a company gets really, really big.
Yeah, indeed. So, and how do you know if it's working? That's the thing. So how do you guys know?
That's a great question. So after there's I think there's two parts of that. There's the quantitative and the qualitative. So the quantitative part of that is anytime Donut makes an intro, it actually comes back and asks the pair, did you meet or not? So we now have years of data, and we have made millions of introductions across our customers. I'll be honest, when we made our first introductions, I had no idea whether it would work. It was a hypothesis. Like, we had this hypothesis. This was a very kind of lean startup thing. Like, hey, we think this could work. Let's build a really fast MVP. It's going to put two people together. Let's get one customer and see what happens. And I'll actually never forget where I was the Friday, 4 p.m. when Donut sent its first ever check-in. Did you meet? And we were like crossing our fingers, holding our breath. Is anybody going to say yes? Did anybody actually meet because of us? And we got all these yeses. We were like, whoa, this actually happened. Like, people,
Wow.
in that case, they were actually going to lunch. We were like, people actually sat down and ate a meal together because our Slack integration introduced them. So there have been many, many iterations from that first MVP in terms of how we make better matches, how we make it a better user experience. But now, years later, I can confidently say, and millions of introductions, successful introductions later, it really does work from a quantitative standpoint. Now, the qualitative is all about talking to and listening to customers and hearing what they have to say about it. So
Right.
I think we knew pretty early that people were enjoying their meetings. People started doing things like taking selfies on their Donut meeting, which, if you're in person, is literally a selfie. If you're on Zoom, we have people that take screenshots of their Zoom screen.
Yeah.
We actually do it now internally. When 2 or 3 people are on a Donut meeting, we'll take a screenshot and post it. We actually run a selfie contest each week internally at Donut, where everybody posts their Donut selfie, and we just use little reactions in Slack to vote on, which one is kind of the coolest or most fun for the week. Which creates a whole other aspect to the program, right? You're sort of creating this flywheel on the social connection where everybody's seeing it and getting involved. But aside from that, it's asking our customers questions like, what is the true value that you're getting from Donut? And we started hearing things back like, I feel more productive because I have more people around me who I can trust and lean on. Or I feel like I'm growing as a leader because I have a stronger network around me. Or I have a wider understanding of our business because now I know a few people in other departments. I understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So these are pretty profound value propositions coming out of what is almost a deceptively simple product and how it works.
For sure. I mean, that is, so I sell workshops that help people work better together remotely. And one of the main challenges that people come is the team building aspect. They're really stuck. Like, how do we build a sense of team online? And in fact, many people say that it can't be done, which is just ridiculous. We see all over the place that it can be done. But the fact that you are getting more trust, a stronger network, and a bigger understanding of the business, I mean, that is huge and deceptively simple. Why do you think it works so well? Is it just, we just need the impetus? Like, are we just creatures of, somebody just needs to come up and say like, hi, I'm Paul, or?
Yeah. So a user once described what Donut does to me with an interesting analogy, where if you're at a networking event, there's that kind of moment where you're not talking to anybody and
standing awkwardly sort of like in the corner.
Standing awkwardly. And then eventually somehow you get somebody and that you get over that little hump and you start talking with them. And the person said to me, Donut like gets you over that hump. Donut like gets you through that awkward thing because it breaks the ice. It puts you together with someone. And, you know, we have users that meet someone every week or every other week in their organization. And they say to me, if I didn't have Donut, I'm not going to just go put on my calendar, hey, reach out to a random person in this company and have coffee with them. It's just not going to happen. I'm not going to talk to these people. So, and we've done a lot of things where you know, optionally we can do a little icebreaker question when we make the intro. We have a GCal integration and a Zoom integration. So we're like trying to remove as much friction as possible to actually getting to that moment of we're talking with each other. Right.
So you just have to find a mutual time and then everything else is taken care of.
Yeah.
So how do you make the matches? I don't expect the secret algorithm of Donut, of course, but like, what are some of the aspects that go into doing it? It can't be totally random.
Yeah, it's actually not totally random. And that's a great question. So there are a few different ways to set up Donut programs, but one of the primary ways to do it is to create a dedicated Slack channel that can have a sort of topic name. So the most basic ones might just be virtual coffee talk. There's lots of people with donut puns like donut be strangers or donut worry, meet someone new. And everybody who's in that channel then gets matched up with each other on a regular cadence. So it might be every other week. It might be every week. It might be every month. In large organizations, there isn't just one donut channel. There's actually frequently multiple or even dozens in a really large company. And those channels can have different topics or interests. So not everybody's going to be in every one. You might have one for different time zones. You might have a mentorship one for engineers that want to mentor, that are going to get matched up. You might have special interests. You might have ERGs. So that's one dimension in which you're in the right donut channel with the right people type of people you want to meet. Within that channel, we actually look at some Slack data to run an algorithm to try to match you with somebody that you don't know well, that you don't work closely with. So we actually get some data from the Slack API that allows us to say, you know, you probably don't work as closely with this person. I'm going to match you with them versus this other person that you're probably, you know, working with all day long.
I really love it. So why call it Donut?
That's a great question. The short answer is because donuts generally make people happy and smile, and we're trying to, you know, it's one of our goals.
Who doesn't like fried sugar bread? I mean, yeah.
Yeah. The slightly longer answer, because quite a bit of thought did go into it, is when we were brainstorming the company name, we got on this riff of sort of cycles and life cycle and kind of 360 and looking around you. And so donut was one of those ideas, right? Being a ring. I mean, we had a whiteboard full of ideas. And when it was time to name the company and the product, we actually went out, and this goes actually to kind of some of the lean startup work that I do, which is all about customer development and talking to customers frequently and often. We went out and user tested company names. So I was out doing customer development, talking with customers about product and their needs and all this stuff. And then at the end of a 45-minute conversation and say, hey, by the way, we have 3 or 4 names we're considering. Can I run them by you? And Donut was by and large everyone's favorite, but more importantly, when I would say the name, there would be this emotional reaction on their face, right? You could see with Donut, people would generally just like light up and smile just at hearing the word. And some of the other words, maybe confused or wait, why are you saying that? Or so you could actually very quickly, even just with 10 people doing that 10 times, there's a really strong pattern. So we're like, okay, that's the winner.
Right, like go with that. So out of just sheer curiosity and a bit of a tangent, how many customers do you have to talk to for doing good customer development on an idea?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say there's no magic number if you're not at least. So I think it depends on how new or different the idea is, right? A whole new business is a different question than Donut is building a new feature. Let's go get feedback on that feature that we have requests for already.
Good point.
I don't think there's any scenario in which the number is less than 5 to 10. You probably want to be getting at least that. But then what it really comes down to is how strong a pattern you see and how quickly you see that. And I have a little rule of thumb that if you get to the point where you can start predicting what you're going to hear, what the customer is going to say to you, and you do that right a few times in a row, you probably have enough, right? If you know what their answers are going to be because you did it 7 times and you're like, the next 5 people are going to say this, right. Or maybe they're going to say these 2 things, and I know what this archetype is going to say this thing, and this other archetype is going to say a different thing. Then you probably got there. You probably learned.
Oh, really, really good rule of thumb. Man, you guys are lucky out there listening. This is some good information. So I want to dive a little bit into the company itself. How many people are working at Donut?
Yeah, we are currently 8 full-time.
Okay.
Plus a handful of contractors and consultants as well.
Okay, and we were talking before we started recording, and you were saying that usually you have people that are working in person in an office in New York, but you have office optional Fridays. So yeah, why is it set up that way? Why do in person? Why not totally remote?
Yeah, so we're clearly a pretty lean team. The founding team was all in New York, so we started with an office, and I'm a pretty avid whiteboarder and kind of getting in the same room and things like that. So we started building the team there. We did do the office optional Friday thing, which we shorthand, we call OOF, OOF. Pretty early on, just for one, to kind of experience that ourselves, but also have a little bit of a different rhythm to the week. It's a little bit of a different day where you can kind of do some deeper independent work and not have a million meetings. At least that's how it worked before we were fully remote during COVID. But I think we hadn't gotten the scale of employee growth yet to kind of start to feel like, okay, we should be expanding beyond New York.
Right, so it's a small team that started in New York that it really just makes sense, like you'd want to get together, of course. So I'd love to ask how things have changed since COVID, and maybe what the transition was like for you guys, because clearly it seems like it's a group of very smart people who have experience working remote. If you have these office optional Fridays, so what happened during COVID?
Yeah. So a few things happened. It was an interesting and abrupt transition, like for everybody in the world. It was certainly easier for us, having already had office optional Fridays, because we had a little bit of that rhythm in us already. And we started, at first we made it just office optional every day when COVID was in its infancy in New York. But then of course we went to offices closed at some point. I think for us it was a pretty, I don't want to say easy, but relative to what I think other companies went through, we dealt with it pretty well. The thing that was unique for us is simultaneously, frankly, we saw an enormous surge in demand for Donut because the
Right.
entire world was going remote at the exact same time, and everybody was almost in a panic over how are we going to stay connected? How are we going to, all be isolated in our homes and do this? So we were actually, for the first couple of weeks of working from home, pretty heads down trying to serve our customers. We even cranked out a few new features specifically for remote customers. Since pre-COVID, we had a big cohort of fully remote companies. We also had companies that were not fully remote using us.
Hmm.
And there were a few feature requests that just like jumped out as like, okay, this is all of a sudden really important. So we had a pretty crazy first 2 to 3 weeks of being remote where we were pretty productive and heads down because we kind of had to be. We were just
Right.
had so much demand.
Yeah, I had the same surge. I was getting so many emails per day. I actually had to hire somebody to help me filter for the stuff that I had to respond to. It was, yeah, overnight. It was really just like from one day to the other. So it must have been the same. I can imagine. So not only are you transitioning to full office optional, well, office, no office any day, to huge surge in demand. But in terms of like keeping your team aligned, is there any sort of team agreement that you have together on how you work, or did you create anything like when you went remote? How did sort of the way you work change a little bit? Like, the hours maybe are different, or
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are constantly experimenting and iterating on how we run our donut program, on how we run the company, on things we do.
right? And I can't
There,
imagine you've got it like totally figured out 100%. Like we're only I don't know how many weeks in we are now. It feels like it feels like Groundhog Days.
yeah,
I've
exactly.
lost a bit of
Totally does.
lost track of time. So I don't, however
Yeah,
many weeks we've been in there, I'm sure it's not, there's still refining and evolution to do.
yeah. So I think there's a few rituals we've started to do that help a little bit. So folks will frequently kind of wave in our general channel and say good morning, or I'm signing off at the end of the day, so that there's a little bit of that like walking into the office, leaving the office moment for folks, that people can feel that. Even during the middle of the day, sometimes folks will say, hey, I'm hopping off for 30 minutes to go for a walk, or I'm gonna run to the grocery store right now while things are a little calmer. And that just like gives you a little bit more of a pulse of like there's other people here working with you, even though you can't see them in an office.
Right.
Um, Sometimes going for a walk on a nice day will snowball. Two people will do it, and then you see everybody says, that's a good idea. I'm gonna go for a walk right now too. Um,
Smart.
which which is kind of nice. I mean, in an office, you might be going for a walk together, but it creates a little bit more community around that. Um, we used to do an in-person team lunch once a week in our office. We have maintained that as a virtual team lunch. So every Tuesday we hop onto a Zoom and people bring food, and we either chat or sometimes try playing a virtual game together online. We also already had a weekly kind of all hands where we all get in sync on stuff. So that of course has been maintained, but I've also sort of added an extra 30 minutes. That's kind of just like an AMA session for me. It's like, what's on people's minds? What do you want to talk about or hear more about? And that can range from what's our work from home policy? How are we thinking about if and when we go back to the office, or how are we pitching in to help the community around us? I mean, us being in New York, we were obviously at the epicenter. And there's a
Right.
handful of things we did for the community. So talking about things like that. So I think that added as well, because some of those casual conversations in an office just happen, right? It's just like
Right.
you're sitting next to someone and it's like, hey, what do you think about this? And you lose some of those moments. And then of course we've iterated on our own donut program. We increased our frequency. We used to do it every other week when we were in the office. We've been experimenting with whether it's once a week or twice a week. Do we want to do pairs? Do we want to do groups of 4? And we've been mixing that up because it kind of keeps it interesting.
Is there anything that will change when COVID is over? Will you go back to the office like before, or will there, do you
Yeah,
know?
I think That's
Who
the
knows,
million dollar
maybe.
question, I think, for everyone. I think I think for the world, that's a who knows. I mean, I think the answer is yes, things will change. I don't think we're going back to the way things used to be. I don't know what the new post-COVID world is going to look like. I think there's going to be a lot more remote work. I think there's going to be a lot more hybrid work where there's companies with an office, but where remote work is just okay and accepted. So it's hard for me to predict 2 months from now, and
Yeah.
I don't think we're going to be out of the woods in 2 months. So I don't know what the new normal is going to look like, however long that takes. But we feel fortunate to obviously be in a position to be doing meaningful work and doing the work that we have to do safely from our homes. So we are not going to rush back to the office. I think, especially being in New York, there's enough strain
Right.
on the system and MTA workers. There's no need for us to be putting more people in public. For me, saying you have to come to our office when we're working extremely productively from home.
Right. Like, why take the chance when it's not
Yeah.
necessary? Like, it's a nice to have, but hang out, especially, yeah, I can imagine being in New York. It's a very intense situation there
Yeah.
at the moment. Man, we are running out of time. I'm so bummed. I have so many questions to ask you, but I have two more questions then. And one is, if you had advice for people who are just starting out with something like Donut, or with Donut, let's say, if people who are just starting out, how would you advise them to start? What's a good way to get going with the program? Do you just like set it up and start, or do you have a way that you would advise? Like, oh no, go with this first.
Yeah. So I think the best way to start is by creating one donut channel, like I described earlier, where you're inviting folks from your team to join it and participate. I think two things, specific recommendations on, and that's very quick to set up. You can add Donut to your Slack team. You can set it up in 10 minutes and then start inviting people to that channel. There's some different settings, frequency, group size, etc. But it's quick to set up. The two things that I would recommend to make it most effective is, number one, make that channel an opt-in channel, not an opt-out channel. So we learned that the hard way early on. If you just throw people into that channel who don't know why they're in it or what they're doing, you're going to start making these intros, and people are going to be very confused. And they, why am I here? What am I doing? Why did
I have
did
to
this
talk to
thing?
so
What?
random guy?
Right.
Yeah.
So, you're very few organizations have 100% participation, and that's okay. You're better off getting the people who really want to do it and make it a great experience. And over time, if you start like that, it actually grows. If people are having a good experience with it, if they're sharing selfies in the channel and having fun, other people want to get in on it. Whereas if you put every single employee in it and 25% of them don't participate, it kind of ruins it for everyone. So
Yeah. And team building really exists on a scale. Some people like it, and really some people don't like it at all. I've learned also the hard way. So yeah, indeed. Good advice.
And then the other piece of advice is, when you set that channel up and invite people to it, be pretty explicit about what your expectation is. Some companies say, get together, talk about anything but work. Just get to know each other. Other companies sometimes say the opposite. They say, hey, get together and brainstorm new initiatives for things we can do. I don't think there's a right or wrong on those, but what is right is actually giving some direction. Because if you just leave it completely open-ended, then you can have that awkward moment of, okay, what are we supposed to talk about?
Right.
So I think those two things lead to a pretty successful program.
Right. I mean, you can make the analogy of just like you randomly throw two people into a room without saying anything, and you close the door and leave, and then they're like, huh? Like, what are we doing here? Like, eventually they'll talk, but not if they can leave. So yeah, awesome. Really good advice. I really like the opt-in, not opt-out. I think that's actually really good advice, because you want it to grow naturally through the company. Then there's more enthusiasm for it also. And the people who are getting together, they're doing it because they want to. And they'll spread that enthusiasm, I'm sure, by being like, man, have you met Bob? He's so cool. He's also like a skier and has 10 dogs or whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
totally great. So the very last, oh, no, I actually have two more questions. I'm sorry. I had one more that popped up. Why wouldn't somebody do this? What are the reasons that people are saying that it's not working for them? I mean, it seems so natural and so important to do something like this in the company. Why are people not doing it?
Yeah,
I
that's a
don't know if
great
you know.
question. I I don't know if I agree with the reasons, but I can tell you some of the reasons I think I hear. One is too busy, don't have time for it, and that's usually at the individual user level, right? I'm a user, I'm not going to do it because I'm just too swamped. I think that's okay in bursts, right? And we have some features that let you snooze your donut intros for a month if you're having a super busy month and you just can't participate. That's okay, I think. But on the whole, I think this is such an important part of being successful in your company, in your role, and growing. Google did they've done all sorts of research on their people, and they actually found that the most successful people built their networks by rotating their dining companions. Like the most successful people at Google actually just meet more people by rotating. And you're building this network, right? You're building all these people. So it really matters, but I think it's not always, the payoff isn't the next day. It's not
Right.
like, here's a project, I just did it, I completed it, I shipped a new product, whatever. So it requires having a little bit of, there's a longer arc to the value proposition, really.
Right.
Other reasons people, I think if you don't do the two things I said up front about making it opt-in, about setting clear expectations, sometimes people don't engage with it and don't meet because it's like you said, it's like put two people in a room and don't say anything. They're not really going to do anything. They might take them 30 minutes before they say anything to you. It's like in an elevator. It's like people get into an elevator.
Yeah.
Talk.
Good analogy. Yeah.
So I think some of the reasons are because things weren't kind of kicked off and positioned properly. And look, we do a lot of work to try to help companies do that, right? It's on some level, it's on us to help folks get the most out of Donut.
Right. You want to help your clients succeed, of course, just like,
Yeah.
or your customers succeed, of course. And I mean, those kind of tips like opt in, not opt out, and being explicit and giving directions, those are two really simple things that people can do that would help them succeed. And if they're setting it up, they're going to want to succeed. So that's awesome. Okay, really last question for reals, which is if people want to know more about you and get in contact with you, what's the best way? Of course, I will link to Donut in the show notes, but for you yourself, what's the best way to get in contact with you?
You can reach out on the usual mechanisms, LinkedIn, Twitter, both work. You can
the usual social media.
The usual social media, yeah. Twitter is just Dan Manion. LinkedIn, just search the name and you'll find me.
Yeah, you were very easy to find, I must admit. So
and then the other way is on our website. There's a little chat bubble. If you chat into support and ask for me, it'll find its way to me as well.
All right. So don't everybody just storm the castle and use Dan's time. He's got to help people connect during COVID. So yeah, but thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate the time. I took copious notes, so I hope to put those translate those into the show notes, but I thought it was a really interesting conversation. I hope more people go out there and try Donut because they're going to want more trust, stronger networks, and a better understanding of the business, right? So the payoff is huge. All right, well, thanks for your time today, and until next time, everybody, be powerful.